They say identity theft is a faceless crime, but the hardest part is when the thief has your mother's eyes. Welcome to the Sarah's Revenge channel. Before I tell you how my parents opened a fraudulent loan in my name to buy my brother Kevin a $90,000 sports car, take a moment to like and subscribe. Drop a comment and let me know how old you are and where you are listening from. Now, let me take you to the exact moment I decided to send my parents to prison. I sat in the fluorescent glare of the Charlotte Police Precinct. The metal chair dug into my spine. Detective Miller placed a printed affidavit on the scarred wooden desk between us. One signature. That was all it took to declare my own flesh and blood guilty of a felony. My hand hovered over the dotted line. To understand how I ended up in this room, we have to go back 48 hours. The air conditioning in the mortgage broker's office hummed a low, steady sound that usually brought me a sense of calm. Not today. Ethan sat beside me, his knee bouncing with nervous energy. We were finalizing the pre-approval for our starter home. I had saved for 5 years. Working endless double shifts at the pediatric ward, sacrificing vacations and dinners out to build a flawless 780 credit score. Ethan smoothed the crease of his tailored slacks, already talking aloud about which contractors we should hire for the kitchen renovations. The broker, a middle-aged man named Greg, cleared his throat. He did not look at Ethan. He looked at me. His expression caught somewhere between pity and deep suspicion. He slid a single sheet of paper across the polished mahogany desk. "Miss Brown, there seems to be a serious discrepancy," Greg said softly. I picked up the paper. The numbers blurred, then sharpened. 510. My chest tightened so hard I forgot to exhale. I read the number again, praying my eyes were playing tricks on me. "That is not my score," I said, my voice barely a whisper in the quiet room. "I checked it last month. It was pristine." Greg tapped a highlighted line near the bottom of the page. "There is a delinquent auto loan opened 8 months ago, $90,000. It is currently 90 days past due." Ethan stopped bouncing his knee. He turned his head slowly. He did not reach for my hand to comfort me. He crossed his arms over his chest, leaning away. "Sarah, what is he talking about? Do you have secret debt you are hiding from me?" His tone carried a razor edge of accusation. I reached over with my right hand and rubbed the faded white scar on my left wrist. It was an old nervous habit, a reflex born in childhood whenever something broke in the house and the blame instantly shifted to me. "No," I said. I pulled my phone from my purse. My fingers felt stiff, almost numb. As I opened my banking app and navigated to the credit portal, the screen loaded. There it was, an auto lender I had never heard of in my life. I clicked into the account details. A silver Corvette. The delivery address was not my Charlotte apartment. It was a 4-bedroom house with a pristine lawn in an affluent suburb, my childhood home. The air left my lungs. I traced the address on the glowing screen. The borrower name was Sarah Brown, but the contact email was an old shared family account I had not used since college. My mother, Susan, and my father, Tom. They used my social security number to buy Kevin a toy. Ethan leaned over my shoulder, his breathing shallow against my neck. "Who bought a sports car in your name?" he demanded. I stared at the screen, the betrayal sinking into my bones like winter chill. A 25-year-old kid cannot walk into a luxury dealership and drive away in a $90,000 car using his 28-year-old sister's credit. Dealerships run strict identity verifications. They check physical licenses. They require wet signatures and in-person verification. How did my parents pull off a federal crime from a desktop computer in their living room? The short drive from Charlotte to the suburbs felt like a fever dream. The asphalt stretched ahead, shimmering under the harsh afternoon sun. My knuckles ached from gripping the steering wheel. I left Ethan standing in the mortgage office parking lot. He told me to call him when I figured out my mess. His parting words echoed in my ears, but a colder, sharper truth drowned them out. This was not my mess. This was a calculated strike. The highway signs blurred past. 8 months ago, the timeline clicked into place with sickening precision. 8 months ago, my parents threw a lavish catered barbecue for Kevin's 25th birthday. I could not attend because I pulled a double shift at the pediatric ward. I spent that weekend monitoring intravenous lines and changing bandages, earning the exact money they were stealing. I turned onto my parents' street. The neighborhood was an engineered paradise of upper-middle-class pretense. Manicured hedges lined the wide sidewalks. Sprinklers swept across flawless green lawns in synchronized rhythm. My mother treated her landscaping like a suit of armor, projecting wealth and stability to everyone who drove past. I parked my reliable 5-year-old sedan on the street. I did not bother knocking. The heavy oak front door swung open, revealing the grand foyer. The air inside smelled of expensive vanilla candles and freshly ground espresso. It looked like a magazine cover. It felt like a crime scene. I walked straight into the kitchen. Tom sat at the island, scrolling through his tablet, a steaming ceramic mug resting near his elbow. Susan stood by the sink, carefully snipping the stems off a fresh bouquet of hydrangeas. They looked peaceful. They looked innocent. I slammed the printed credit report onto the pristine marble counter. The sharp slap of paper hitting stone echoed through the room. Susan dropped her pruning shears. Tom slowly raised his eyes from the glowing screen. "Explain this," I demanded. My voice did not shake. The anger had burned away the panic, leaving only cold clarity. They did not gasp. They did not feign confusion. There was no widened gaze or sudden intake of breath. Tom merely sighed, adjusting his silver-framed glasses. Susan picked up a linen towel and wiped her hands, her movements deliberate and slow. "Keep your voice down," my father said, his tone flat. "The windows are open. The neighbors can hear you." "You committed felony fraud," I said, stepping closer to the island. "You forged my signature on a $90,000 auto loan." Susan folded the linen towel. She looked at me with a mild, disappointed expression, the kind she used when I brought home a bad grade in middle school. "Do not use such ugly words, Sarah. It is not fraud. It is family borrowing." The audacity struck me like a physical blow. "How did you bypass the dealership background check? They require a wet signature or an encrypted digital footprint." A memory surfaced, sudden and sharp. 2 months before Kevin's birthday, I kept getting locked out of my streaming platforms. My television password stopped working. My online shopping account triggered security alerts. I had brushed it off as a glitch. Susan smiled, a thin, proud curve of her lips. "You always were careless with your digital security. You left your old laptop logged in when you moved out years ago. You still use the name of your childhood golden retriever for your recovery questions." My stomach twisted. My own mother hacked my dormant email address. She intercepted the electronic signature packet from the dealership. "The finance manager is a guy your father plays golf with." Susan explained, her tone conversational. "He just needed the digital form verified through a valid email. We clicked a button. It was very simple. You stole my identity to buy Kevin a toy," I stated. Tom set his coffee mug down. The ceramic clinked against the marble. Kevin needed a reliable vehicle to launch his new high-end real estate career. You cannot drive clients to million-dollar listings in a beat-up hatchback. He needed to project success. My father looked at me, his eyes hard and unyielding. "You had a perfect credit score just sitting there gathering dust. You are a floor nurse. You wear scrubs. You do not need to impress anyone." We utilized an untapped family asset. They were weaving an alternate reality, twisting their theft into a righteous act. You utilized my future, I shot back. My fiancé and I just lost our mortgage approval and you are 3 months behind on the payments. The bank is charging daily late fees. Susan waved a hand, swatting away my panic like a minor annoyance. You are overreacting about invisible numbers on a screen. Kevin is building his portfolio. Real estate takes time to pop. He will catch up on the payments as soon as his commissions clear. Stop being so selfish. The word selfish hung in the air, a toxic label they had pinned on me since childhood. Whenever I asked for my fair share, I am not waiting for his imaginary commissions, I said, stepping around the island. Where are the keys? I am driving that car back to the dealership today and surrendering it. Tom stood up. He was a tall man and he used his physical presence to intimidate. His shadow fell over me. His voice dropped to a low, dangerous register. You will do no such thing. You will not humiliate your brother. You will go back to Charlotte and calm down. Before I could fire back, a low, guttural rumble vibrated through the hardwood floor beneath my boots. A mechanical roar cut through the quiet suburban street, drowning out the chirping birds and the hiss of the sprinklers. The sound grew louder, echoing off the manicured houses. Tires crunched onto the paved driveway. The engine revved one final deafening time before shutting off. The golden child had arrived. The architects of this disaster had justified their crime with chilling ease. But how would the beneficiary react when his sister marched outside to demand her financial freedom back? The heavy oak front door vibrated as the sports car engine cut out. Through the sheer living room curtains, the harsh Carolina sun caught the sleek silver hood of the Corvette, turning it into a blinding mirror. The driver's side door swung upward in a smooth, theatrical arc. Kevin stepped onto the paved concrete driveway. He was not wearing a tailored suit to impress high-end real estate clients. He wore a neon designer logo t-shirt, ripped denim jeans, and a pair of oversized reflective sunglasses. In his right hand, he gripped a carbon fiber selfie stick attached to the latest flagship smartphone. He extended his arm, finding his angles, talking into the lens with a practiced, arrogant grin. He circled the vehicle, tracing his fingers along the metallic paint, recording every inch of the $90,000 machine he did not pay for. Watching him preen triggered a physical reaction deep in my chest. A cold sweat broke across my palms. The low rumble of that exhaust transported me 12 years into the past. I was 16 again, standing in this exact foyer. I had spent a year bagging groceries and picking up extra shifts at a local diner to buy a dented second-hand Honda Civic. It was my ticket to independence. One Friday night while I slept, a 14-year-old Kevin swiped the keys off the kitchen table. He took it for a joyride and wrapped the front bumper around a neighbor's oak tree. When the police brought him home, Susan did not ground him. She did not yell at him. She turned her furious gaze on me. I can still hear her shrill voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling, asking why I was so irresponsible to leave my keys out in the open. She told the officers, "Boys will be boys." But a young lady should know better than to leave temptation in plain sight. I was grounded for a month. Kevin received a warning. I rubbed the faded white scar on my left wrist, a physical remnant of punching my bedroom wall that night in sheer helpless frustration. History was not just repeating itself. It was upgrading. The front door clicked open. Kevin walked in, still recording his broadcast. "And that, my elite circle, is how we secure the bag before we hit 30, Kevin said into his phone, dropping his voice into an artificial raspy baritone. "Stay tuned for Module 4, where we discuss leveraging external assets to build your portfolio." He tapped the screen to stop the video and finally noticed me standing rigid near the kitchen island. His smile did not falter. It morphed into a slow, deliberate smirk. "Look who decided to visit the estate," Kevin drawled, slipping the phone into his back pocket. Did you come to admire the new studio? I repeated the word, tasting like ash in my mouth. Tom told me you needed a car for real estate to drive clients around town. Kevin let out a sharp, mocking laugh. He glanced at our father, who remained seated silently sipping his coffee as if watching a mildly entertaining television show. Real estate is for the previous generation, Sarah. I am building a digital empire. My followers pay $500 a month for access to my crypto wealth masterclass. We are talking Web3 decentralized finance, the alpha mindset. The car is the hook. You cannot sell a luxury lifestyle paradigm if you are driving a beige sedan. He was running a pyramid scheme. He was using a stolen identity to lease a prop for a fake internet persona. He was parroting phrases he heard from online grifters. I took a step toward him, my boots clicking against the hardwood. You are 3 months behind on the loan. You are tanking my credit score for an internet scam. Kevin rolled his eyes, sauntering over to the stainless steel refrigerator. He pulled out a bottle of imported sparkling water and twisted the cap off, the hiss of carbonation breaking the tense silence. It is not a scam. It is an investment phase. You just do not understand hustle culture. You spend 12 hours a day wiping noses and checking blood pressure monitors. Floor nurses think small. You trade hours for pennies. I am building generational wealth. You are stealing my wealth. I countered, my voice tight, fighting to keep my temper from boiling over. Hand over the keys. Right now I am taking the car back to the dealer. Kevin took a long sip of his water. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, sleek black fob, a spare the valet key. He tossed it onto the marble island. The plastic and metal clattered loudly against the stone, sliding to a stop inches from my hand. There is a spare, Kevin said, shrugging his shoulders in a display of exaggerated indifference. I have so many keys to so many doors right now. I cannot even keep track. Take it. See how far you get. I reached for the spare fob, my fingers curling around the smooth, heavy plastic. I will drive it straight to the lot today. Go ahead, Kevin said, his voice dripping with condescension. But you might want to check the fine print on the paperwork first. The loan is tied to your social security number. You are the financial guarantor. But the vehicle title, the state registration, those are strictly in my name. If you drive that car off this property, I will call the police and report it stolen. The air left my lungs. The trap was flawless. They had orchestrated this with surgical precision, likely guided by Tom and his golf course connections. I held the debt. He held the asset. If I touched the vehicle to return it and clear my name, I became the criminal. I would be arrested for grand theft auto. Susan hurried around the counter, stepping between us like a human shield. She placed a manicured hand on Kevin's chest, smoothing out the fabric of his neon shirt. Leave your brother alone, Sarah. He is under an immense amount of pressure to perform for his audience. He does not need your negativity bringing down his energy today. He is on the verge of a breakthrough. A breakthrough, I whispered, staring at the woman who raised me. He is bankrupting me. Only if you lack faith, Susan replied smoothly, her tone unyielding. We are a team. Families support each other through the building phases. If you cannot understand that fundamental concept, maybe you should leave. I looked at Tom, who refused to meet my gaze, choosing instead to study his tablet. I looked at Susan, fiercely defending a parasite. I looked at Kevin, sipping sparkling water with a triumphant, untouchable grin. The physical space of the kitchen felt like it was shrinking. The walls pressed inward, squeezing the oxygen out of the room. There was no reasoning here. There was no logic, no empathy, no remorse. I was standing in a den of predators who wore familiar faces. I tightened my grip on the small black fob. I slipped the valet key into my jacket pocket. None of them noticed the slight movement. I turned on my heel and walked out the front door. The Carolina heat hit me instantly, suffocating and thick, but I felt freezing cold. I sat in my dependable paid-off car and locked the doors. My hands trembled violently as I pulled out my phone. I opened my messages and found Ethan's contact. I needed him. I needed the man I was supposed to marry to tell me we would fight this injustice together. I needed his analytical mind to help me untangle this legal web. I needed someone in my corner. I typed a frantic message. They admitted it. They forged the documents. The title is in his name. Please tell me you are home. I need you right now. I pressed send. The message delivered. I sat in the driveway staring at the silver Corvette reflecting the afternoon sun, waiting for the 3 little dots to appear on my screen indicating Ethan was typing. I was entirely alone against my family. The foundation of my past had crumbled beneath my feet. Everything now rested on my future. Could my fiancé, the man who promised to stand by me through better or worse, provide the legal and emotional backup I desperately needed to survive this betrayal? The drive back to my Charlotte apartment passed in a blur of highway lines and static from the radio. The air conditioning blasted, yet I felt a suffocating heat rising in my chest. The walls of my life, the carefully constructed reality I had spent years building, were crumbling. I parked in my designated spot, the familiarity of the concrete structure offering a small fleeting comfort. I climbed the 3 flights of stairs, the sound of my boots echoing off the cement, a stark contrast to the chaotic silence in my head. I unlocked the door, the familiar scent of lavender and citrus cleaner washing over me. Ethan was sitting at the dining table. He had changed out of his tailored slacks into comfortable joggers and a faded college t-shirt. A stack of printed documents sat in front of him, illuminated by the harsh overhead light. He looked up, his expression a carefully arranged mask of concern. He did not ask how the confrontation went. He did not ask if I was okay. "I have been thinking," Ethan said, his voice smooth and practiced. He patted the empty chair beside him. "Come sit down. We need a strategy." I dropped my purse on the counter and sank into the chair. My body ached, a deep, pervasive weariness settling into my bones. The adrenaline from the confrontation with Kevin and my parents was fading, leaving behind a raw, exposed vulnerability. "I told them to give me the keys," I said, my voice hoarse. Kevin laughed. "The title is in his name. The debt is in mine. I cannot legally take the car without being charged with theft." Ethan nodded slowly, tracing the edge of the paper stack with his index finger. "I figured as much. Your father is a calculating man. He would not leave a loophole. But I have a solution. A brilliant compromise that gets you out of this mess and keeps our timeline intact." I looked at him, a desperate ember of hope flaring in my chest. My fiancé, my partner. He was analyzing the problem. He was finding a way out. "Going to the police is a nuclear option," Ethan continued, his tone turning persuasive. "If you file a fraud report, it will drag on for months. The investigation, the family drama, the legal fees, it will ruin our wedding plans. Your credit will be frozen during the dispute. We will lose the house. We cannot let your family's mistake derail our future." He slid the top document toward me. It was a draft for a personal consolidation loan from a local credit union. "Here is the play," Ethan said, leaning forward, his eyes bright with the thrill of a deal. "We take out this joint loan. We pay off the $90,000 balance on the Corvette entirely. That clears the delinquent account off your credit report. Your score bounces back. We secure the mortgage." "And then what?" I asked, staring at the typed figures. "I am still $90,000 in debt." "No, you are not," Ethan corrected, tapping the paper. "Once the car is paid off, Kevin has no leverage. We demand the title transfer from him. If he refuses, we threaten the police. He will fold. We take the car, sell it on the private market, and use the cash to pay off the consolidation loan. Clean, efficient, no courts. No destroyed family holidays. It sounded logical. It sounded like the kind of pragmatic problem-solving I had admired when we first started dating. Ethan was an actuary. He calculated risk for a living. He was managing our crisis. I picked up the document, the thick paper feeling heavy in my hands. The terms were dense, filled with financial jargon. I scanned the lines looking for the catch, the hidden cost. My eyes landed on the section detailing collateral and ownership. I read the paragraph twice. The words blurred, then sharpened, stabbing into my retinas. The primary applicant for the consolidation loan was Sarah Brown. The secondary applicant acting as a guarantor with minimal liability was Ethan Vance. But the section below outlining the transfer of assets once the initial auto loan was settled caught my breath. The new title for the Corvette pending transfer from Kevin Brown would be registered solely under Ethan Vance. I traced the printed name, Ethan Vance. I looked up at him. The mask of concern had slipped, revealing a calculating hunger. "Why is your name the only one listed for the vehicle title?" I asked, my voice steady, betraying none of the earthquake happening inside me. Ethan blinked, a fleeting shadow of annoyance crossing his features. "It is a protective measure. If your family tries another stunt, they cannot touch the asset if it is in my name. Your credit history is currently compromised. It makes the paperwork cleaner." "Cleaner," I repeated. "You want me to absorb $90,000 of new debt to pay off my parents' fraud, and you want sole ownership of the luxury car we recover. It is a temporary hold, Sarah. Do not make this into something it is not. I am trying to save our house. I am trying to save our wedding." He was trying to secure a free asset. He saw an opportunity in my devastation. He calculated the risk and decided my financial ruin was an acceptable price for a $90,000 sports car. I have spent the last 5 years working double shifts. I said, the realization settling over me like a heavy, suffocating blanket. I paid for our vacations. I covered the rent while you studied for your actuarial exams. I built a perfect credit score so we could have a future. And the moment it is threatened, you do not stand beside me. You angle for a payout. "Sarah, you are being hysterical," Ethan said, his voice hardening, the practiced smoothness gone. "Your family created this disaster because you were careless with your digital security. You allowed this to happen. I am offering a lifeline." "You are offering an anchor," I replied, standing up from the table. "I am not taking out another loan. I am not absorbing their crime to protect your wedding timeline. I am going to the police." Ethan stared at me, his jaw clenching. He stood up the chair, scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "You file that report, you drag your family through the mud, and you will tie up your credit in litigation for a year. We lose the house. We lose the venue. Then we lose it," I said. Ethan looked at me for a long, silent moment. The man I thought I was going to marry, the man I envisioned building a life with, disappeared. In his place stood a stranger, annoyed that his investment had depreciated. He walked past me, heading straight for the bedroom. The sound of a zipper echoed from the hallway. Minutes later, he emerged carrying a black leather duffel bag. He walked into the kitchen and stopped at the counter. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the platinum engagement ring I had taken off earlier to wash my hands. He placed it carefully on the granite surface. The metal clinked softly. "We need a break," Ethan said, adjusting the strap of his duffel bag. "I cannot tie my financial future to someone who attracts this level of chaos. Call me when you clean up your messy family drama." He turned and walked out the front door. The lock clicked shut. A final definitive sound. I stood in the center of the apartment. The silence was absolute. Within 24 hours, I had lost my parents. I had lost my brother. I had lost my fiancé. The people who were supposed to be my foundation had either robbed me or abandoned me the moment I ceased to be profitable. I walked over to the kitchen counter and stared at the engagement ring. The diamond caught the overhead light sparkling flawlessly. It was an illusion, a beautiful, expensive lie. The grief swelled a physical ache in my chest, but it did not break me. The tears that burned the edges of my eyes evaporated, replaced by a cold, absolute resolve. I was not a victim. I was a casualty of their greed, but I refused to be collateral damage. I reached for my purse, my fingers finding the hard plastic of the valet key Kevin had tossed at me. My parents thought I was a compliant floor nurse who would absorb their theft to keep the peace. Ethan thought I was a desperate woman who would buy his loyalty with a luxury vehicle. They had all miscalculated. My phone buzzed on the counter, a sudden vibration shattering the silence. I glanced at the screen. It was not a text from Ethan. It was not a manipulative message from my mother. It was an automated email notification marked urgent. The sender was the Human Resources Director of Charlotte General Hospital. The subject line read, "Mandatory disciplinary hearing. Immediate action required." I unlocked the phone, my thumb hovering over the screen. The financial fallout was spreading faster than I anticipated. I had lost my family and my fiancé. Now the career I had sacrificed everything to build was in the crosshairs. The fluorescent lights in the Human Resources office emitted a constant high-pitched hum. It was the kind of noise you only noticed when the silence in the room became unbearable. Patricia, the department director, sat across from me. Her hands were folded neatly over a thick manila folder. She did not wear her usual welcoming smile. Her posture was rigid professional and entirely devoid of warmth. She slid a stapled stack of papers across the polished oak desk. The top page bore the official seal of the Mecklenburg County Circuit Court. "I need you to look at this, Sarah," Patricia said, her tone hushed. I picked up the document. The legal jargon swam before my eyes, but certain phrases jumped off the page like physical strikes. Default judgment. Writ of garnishment 25% of disposable earnings. My throat closed tight. I tried to speak, but the words snagged in my dry mouth. "What is this?" I finally managed to whisper. Patricia leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "That is a court order demanding the hospital intercept a quarter of your paycheck. The auto lender for a $90,000 vehicle secured a default judgment against you. You missed the court date. Sarah, the judge, ruled in their favor by default. They bypassed collections and went straight for your wages." "I missed the court date." I repeated, the absurdity of the statement ringing hollow. "I never received a summons. I was never served." Patricia pointed to a line near the bottom of the page. The notice was delivered via certified mail to the registered address on the loan file. I followed her manicured fingernail. The address, printed in bold black ink, belonged to the house in the suburbs. My parents had intercepted the court summons. They signed for a legal document knowing it was a lawsuit against me, and they threw it in the trash to protect Kevin. They let a judge hand down a financial death sentence while I was working 12-hour shifts to save for a wedding that no longer existed. "I can explain this," I said, my voice rising in pitch. "It is fraud. My identity was stolen. I did not buy that car." Patricia let out a long, heavy breath. "I want to believe you. You are one of the most dedicated pediatric nurses on this floor. Your patient care record is flawless, but my hands are tied by risk management protocols." She opened the manila folder and pulled out a secondary policy manual. "You understand the liabilities of your position. You have unrestricted access to automated medication dispensing cabinets. You administer narcotics, oxycodone, morphine, fentanyl. A cold dread settled over my shoulders. I know the protocols. Then you know that a nurse under severe financial duress is classified as a critical flight risk, Patricia stated, her eyes locking onto mine. Wage garnishment triggers an automatic audit. Statistics show that hospital staff facing sudden insurmountable debt are the highest risk category for medication diversion. The board views you as a liability. They think you might steal drugs to sell on the street to pay off your creditors. I would never compromise my patients. I countered, my hands gripping the edge of the desk so tight my knuckles turned white. I am a victim of a crime. Patricia offered a tight, sympathetic nod. Then you need to prove it. The hospital administration is giving you a grace period because of your spotless history. You have 30 days. You must provide a verified police report and an official fraud discharge from the lender. If you cannot produce those documents within 30 days, I am required to place you on unpaid administrative leave, pending an investigation by the state nursing board. If I lose my paycheck, I lose my apartment. I said, the reality crashing down on me. I cannot pay my rent. I am truly sorry, Sarah Patricia whispered. 30 days! I walked out of the administrative wing. The linoleum floors stretched out before me, a sterile white path leading nowhere. Nurses rushed past, pushing medication carts and checking patient charts. Yesterday, I was one of them. Today, I was an imposter waiting to be escorted out by security. The career I sacrificed my youth to build was evaporating. I did not go back to my apartment. I could not face the empty rooms where Ethan had packed his life away. I took the elevator down to the subterranean parking garage. The concrete walls trapped the thick, humid Carolina air. I climbed into my car, slammed the door shut, and locked it. The silence inside the cabin offered a temporary sanctuary. I pulled my phone from my scrubs. My thumb hovered over my contacts. I had one option left before I initiated a nuclear strike on my own bloodline. I selected my father's name and pressed the call button. The line rang 3 times. Tom answered, his voice brusque, laced with the annoyance of a man interrupted during important business. What is it, Sarah? I am in the middle of a quarterly review. They are garnishing my wages, I said, bypassing any greeting. Silence stretched over the line. I heard the faint rustle of papers, then the sound of a door closing. Tom had moved to a private room. What are you talking about? He demanded. The lender sued me. I explained, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. They sent the court summons to your house. You hid the mail. Now a judge has ordered the hospital to seize a quarter of my paycheck. The human resources director just gave me 30 days to clear the fraud, or they will suspend my medical license for being a high-risk liability. Tom exhaled sharply. That is an overreaction on their part. Just pay the garnishment for a few months. Kevin is putting together a massive real estate deal. He will reimburse you with interest once the commission check clears. There is no real estate deal, I shot back. He is filming fake internet videos for a crypto scam. He is never going to pay for that car. You need to refinance the loan into your name today. Take the debt off my record or I will lose my career. I cannot do that, Tom replied, his tone shifting from annoyed to defensive. My debt-to-income ratio is stretched thin right now. If I take on a $90,000 liability, the bank will call in the second mortgage on our house. The truth slipped out ugly and bare. They were drowning in debt to maintain their country club facade. Kevin was not just their golden child. He was their desperate gamble for a financial bailout. If you do not refinance that car, I am going to the police, I stated. I am filing a felony identity theft report. The line went dead quiet. When Tom finally spoke, his voice was chillingly calm. It lacked any trace of paternal affection. It was the calculated voice of a predator protecting its territory. If you walk into a police precinct, you are dead to this family. Tom said, each syllable carved from ice. "You will never step foot in our home again, and do not think you will find sympathy with your aunts or cousins." "I do not need their sympathy," I countered. "I need my life back." Tom let out a low, humorless chuckle. "Who do you think they will believe, Sarah? A respected community leader and a loving mother, or an erratic, unstable daughter who just got dumped by her fiancé?" A cold shiver raced down my spine. "What are you going to do if you file that report? We will tell everyone the truth." Tom lied effortlessly. "We will tell the extended family that you bought that car for your brother as a gift during a manic episode. We will say the wedding stress caused a psychotic break, and now you are lashing out and making up delusional stories about fraud because Ethan left you. We will paint you as a bitter, unpredictable woman who needs psychiatric intervention. Your Aunt Carol will spread it to the entire county before sunset. You will be a pariah." The betrayal was so profound it transcended anger. He was willing to destroy my reputation, my sanity, and my livelihood to protect a silver sports car. "Do not test me," Sarah Tom warned. "You drop this crusade and you handle the payments until Kevin is ready, or you lose everything." I ended the call. I did not argue. I did not cry. The tears had dried up, leaving behind a barren landscape of pure, unadulterated resolve. I started the engine and drove home. My apartment felt hollow without Ethan, but the emptiness provided the exact clarity I needed. I opened my laptop and navigated to the Federal Trade Commission website. I downloaded the official identity theft affidavit. I typed in my personal information. I detailed the forged electronic signatures. I listed the suburban address where the fraudulent vehicle was currently housed. I attached a digital copy of the writ of garnishment from the Mecklenburg County Court. I reviewed the document. This piece of paper would detonate my family structure. It would send detectives to my father's workplace. It would ruin my mother's flawless reputation. It would expose Kevin as a fraud. I thought about the threat. I thought about Tom promising to brand me as a delusional outcast. I placed my right hand over my left wrist, tracing the faded scar. For 28 years, I had absorbed their mistakes to keep the peace. I had played the silent scapegoat. I moved the cursor to the top right corner of the screen. I did not hesitate. I clicked print. The inkjet printer hummed to life. The mechanical grinding sounded like a battle drum in the quiet apartment. I watched the crisp white paper slide into the tray covered in stark black ink. The declaration of war was printed, signed, and ready for deployment. The stakes had transcended a simple credit score. My freedom, my career, and my sanity were on the line. Would the golden child recognize the incoming storm, or would he continue to bask in the illusion of his stolen empire? The air in the Charlotte police precinct smelled of industrial floor wax and stale coffee. I sat in a dented metal chair, the same one I had occupied in my memory at the very beginning of this nightmare. Detective Miller sat across the scarred wooden desk, a graying man with tired eyes and a methodical, unhurried demeanor. He picked up the printed identity theft affidavit I had compiled in my apartment. He flipped through the pages, his gaze scanning the forged electronic signatures, the Mecklenburg County Court order, and the detailed timeline of events. He set the packet down and folded his hands. He looked at me, his expression softening just a fraction, acknowledging the gravity of the situation. "Are you certain you want to proceed with this, Ms. Brown? Filing a false report is a crime. But more importantly, once I enter this into the system, it becomes an active felony investigation. The suspects named here are your biological parents. There is no retracting this once the district attorney gets involved." I did not flinch. I did not look away. The hesitation I might have felt 24 hours ago had been burned away by my father threatening to brand me as a psychiatric liability. They had chosen a silver sports car over their daughter. They had chosen an illusion over my survival. I am certain I said, my voice steady, carrying a quiet finality. They committed a crime. I am the victim. I want to press charges. Detective Miller nodded once. He slid a blue ink pen across the desk. He pointed to a dotted line at the bottom of the final page. Sign here, he instructed. I picked up the pen. The plastic felt cold against my fingertips. I pressed the tip to the paper and wrote my name. The ink flowed smoothly, leaving a permanent binding mark. With a few loops and lines, I severed the invisible chains of generational guilt. I was no longer the silent scapegoat of the suburban house. I handed the pen back. Detective Miller stamped the document. He handed me a carbon copy of the official police report, complete with a case number printed in bold red ink at the top right corner. Keep this safe, he advised. Send it to your creditors immediately. It is your shield. I walked out of the precinct into the bright Carolina sunlight. The heat washed over me, but instead of feeling suffocated, I felt lighter. The oppressive weight of the $90,000 debt had shifted from my shoulders into the hands of the legal system. I sat in the driver's seat of my sedan and locked the doors. I opened my laptop, tethered it to my phone's connection, and navigated to the auto lender's secure fraud portal. I uploaded the scanned PDF of the police report, entering the red case number into the designated field. Then I dialed the toll-free number for the lender's fraud department. A representative named Marcus answered the call. His tone was initially clinical and detached, the voice of a man accustomed to hearing desperate excuses from delinquent borrowers. I explained the situation and provided my new case number. I heard the clacking of his keyboard over the line. A moment later, Marcus stopped typing. The bored routine tone vanished from his voice, replaced by the sharp, focused cadence of a serious investigator. I see the Mecklenburg County Police report, Ms. Brown. I am reviewing the sworn affidavit now. What happens next? I asked, watching a patrol car cruise past my parking spot. Marcus cleared his throat. First, I am placing an immediate administrative freeze on the account. We are halting all collection efforts directed at you. I am also submitting a retraction to the credit bureaus regarding the derogatory marks, and I am issuing a cease and desist to the local court regarding the wage garnishment order. You are formally detached from this liability pending the final internal review, which is standard procedure when a valid police report is filed. I closed my eyes, a long, shaky breath escaping my lips. The financial tourniquet had been applied. The bleeding had stopped. But there is a second phase to this process. Marcus continued, his tone turning authoritative. The vehicle in question represents a high-value unsecured asset obtained through fraudulent origination. We are flagging the collateral for skip tracing and asset recovery. Asset recovery, I repeated, ensuring I understood the terminology. You are going to repossess the car. Correct, Marcus affirmed. Our contracted recovery agents operate swiftly. The vehicle has been flagged as a priority target. However, these situations can be tricky if the individual possessing the asset knows we are coming. Have you informed the unauthorized drivers about this police report? No, I replied, my eyes opening, staring at the dashboard. They think I am submitting to their demands. They think I am too afraid to fight back. Keep it that way, Marcus advised. The element of surprise is our greatest advantage. Our agents will begin sweeping the registered suburban address tonight. I ended the call and set my phone on the passenger seat. The counteroffensive had begun. The bank had deployed their hounds and Kevin was the prey. I drove back to my apartment and initiated a strict, unwavering protocol of radio silence. The psychological warfare of isolation is a brutal game, but I played it with cold precision. For the next 3 weeks, my phone buzzed incessantly. The notifications stacked up on my screen like discarded trash. Tom sent terse, authoritative texts. demanding I call him to discuss a payment schedule. Susan deployed emotional manipulation, sending long paragraphs about how family must endure hardships together, peppered with passive-aggressive remarks about my lack of gratitude. I read every single message. I did not reply to a single one. Instead, I watched my brother's digital footprint. Kevin continued to post his daily broadcast to his meager following of crypto enthusiasts. He filmed himself leaning against the sleek hood of the Corvette, spouting empty platitudes about building wealth and dominating the market. He looked smug. He looked untouchable. He was entirely unaware that a financial sniper rifle was aimed directly at his pristine hood ornament. But as the days dragged on, I noticed a recurring detail in his videos. The lighting was always artificial. The background was always the same painted drywall and concrete floor. He was not driving the car around town. He was filming his content inside Tom's detached, climate-controlled workshop garage. He was keeping his prize locked away behind heavy steel doors. While the repo agents prowled the neighborhood, I received a piece of mail that brought me to my knees. It was an official envelope bearing the Charlotte General Hospital letterhead. I tore it open. Patricia's signature sat at the bottom of a brief formal memorandum. The human resources audit had been closed. The court-ordered garnishment was officially voided due to pending fraud litigation. My nursing license was cleared of all risk factors. My career was safe. I sat on my living room floor and wept not from sadness, but from the overwhelming tidal wave of relief. The next morning, the fragile peace was interrupted by an unknown number calling my phone. I answered cautiously. It was a man named Vince, the lead skip tracer contracted by the auto lender. "Miss Brown, we have a logistical snag," Vince stated, his voice rough, sounding like gravel on pavement. "We have confirmed the asset is located at the suburban address. We have eyes on the property." "Then why have you not taken it?" I asked, pacing across my kitchen. "Because the target is keeping the vehicle secured inside a detached garage," Vince explained, frustration edging into his tone. "My crew operates strictly within the bounds of the law. We cannot breach a locked private structure. That constitutes breaking and entering. We need the vehicle exposed. We need it on the street or at the very least parked out in the open driveway. Until he brings it out of that vault, our hands are tied." A knot formed in my stomach. The debt was paused, but the justice was incomplete. If Kevin kept the car hidden, he could drag this out for months. The bank would eventually have to pursue a lengthy civil replevin lawsuit to compel Tom to open the garage. I needed a swift surgical strike. I needed the car out in the open. I thanked Vince and ended the call, my mind racing through possibilities. How could I convince a paranoid, arrogant scammer to parade his stolen trophy in broad daylight? An electronic chime echoed from my laptop. A shared calendar notification popped up on the screen, a digital remnant from when Ethan and I synced our schedules with my family's events. Kevin 26th birthday barbecue Saturday afternoon. A few seconds later, my phone vibrated. A new text message from Susan illuminated the glass screen. It was a master class in maternal manipulation. "Sarah, we are expecting you on Saturday at noon. Your brother deserves a celebration. Put on a nice dress, bring a thoughtful gift, and be prepared to apologize for your recent tantrums. We are willing to forgive your behavior if you show some maturity. Do not embarrass us." I stared at the glowing text. A slow, chilling realization washed over me. The barbecue was an outdoor event. Tom was grilling on the patio. The guests would be arriving, parking along the street, walking up the main path. Kevin thrived on an audience. He fed on the envy of his peers. There was no way he would keep a $90,000 sports car hidden behind a closed garage door when he had 30 guests arriving to celebrate his existence. He would want it displayed. He would want it front and center, catching the sunlight for everyone to admire. The trap was perfectly set. but the bait required my presence. I needed to walk into the lion's den to ensure the prize was sitting on the pedestal. The repo agents were waiting in the shadows, paralyzed by a garage door. How could I ensure my brother left the vehicle parked in the open driveway, practically gift-wrapped for a heavy-duty tow truck, while I smiled at the guests? The silence from my end of the communication line had clearly unsettled my parents. When manipulators lose access to their primary target, they rarely retreat. Instead, they pivot. They seek out a new audience to validate their narrative. Tom and Susan were masters of public relations within our extended family network. If they could not control me directly, they would control the story surrounding me. They launched a preemptive strike deploying a calculated smear campaign designed to brand me as the unstable antagonist before the truth could ever see the light of day. The first volley arrived on a Thursday evening, 2 days before the barbecue. My phone rang, displaying a caller identification that made me sit up straighter. It was Aunt Carol. Carol was my father's older sister, a woman whose sharp tongue and hawkish observation skills were legendary within the family tree. She did not suffer fools, and she certainly did not tolerate drama unless she was the one orchestrating it. Carol lived in a sprawling ranch house just outside of Charlotte, holding court over family gossip with a mixture of amusement and brutal honesty. Growing up, I had always maintained a cautious distance, aware that her favor was conditional and her judgment swift. I answered the call, bracing for impact. Sarah Carol began, her voice carrying that distinct, commanding resonance. "I just spent 45 minutes on the phone with your mother. She was practically in tears. Would you care to explain why you are threatening to sue your own parents over a simple financial misunderstanding?" The phrasing was deliberate. A simple financial misunderstanding. That was the spin. Susan had framed $90,000 of felony identity theft as a minor bookkeeping error that I was blowing out of proportion. I did not raise my voice. I did not slip into the defensive, frantic tone they likely expected me to use. The old Sarah would have stammered, trying desperately to explain the nuances of the situation while being talked over. The new Sarah possessed federal documentation. "Aunt Carol," I said, keeping my tone perfectly level, "I am not suing them. I filed a police report for felony identity theft." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "A police report." Carol repeated, the skepticism thick in her voice. "Susan said Kevin needed a co-signer for a vehicle, and you agreed, but then changed your mind because of wedding stress and started making wild threats." "They are lying," I stated simply. "I never agreed. They used a dormant email address to forge my electronic signature. They intercepted a court summons sent to their house. The lender secured a default judgment against me, and the Mecklenburg County Court issued an order to garnish 25% of my nursing wages. Charlotte General Hospital almost suspended my medical license because of it." The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with the realization that the narrative Susan had spun was unraveling. Carol was not a woman easily swayed by emotion, but she respected hard facts. "Those are very serious accusations," Sarah Carol said, her tone shifting from accusatory to cautious. "Are you telling me your father committed wire fraud to buy Kevin a car?" "I am not just telling you," I replied, opening my laptop. "I am showing you. Check your email." I attached the Mecklenburg County Court order, the hospital HR memorandum regarding the garnishment threat, and the official police report bearing the red case number. I hit send. I waited, listening to the faint hum of my apartment refrigerator. While Carol navigated her inbox, I heard the faint click of a computer mouse on her end, then a long, drawn-out exhale. "Good Lord," Carol murmured. Her voice lost its sharp edge, replaced by genuine shock. She was looking at the undeniable proof of Tom and Susan's criminality. The forged documents, the court order targeting my paycheck, The evidence was irrefutable. They told me you were having a breakdown, Carol said, the indignation building in her voice. Tom swore on his life that you were lashing out because Ethan left you. He painted you as unhinged. Ethan left me because he found out about the debt and wanted to leverage the situation to steal the title for himself, I clarified, dropping the final piece of the puzzle into place. I am entirely alone in this, Aunt Carol. The lender has frozen the account, but Kevin is keeping the car locked in Tom's detached garage so the recovery agents cannot reach it. Another pause. The gears in Carol's mind were turning. She despised being lied to, and Tom had used her as a pawn in his smear campaign. The indignation morphed into a cold, calculated fury. Well, Carol said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, we certainly cannot let Tom get away with utilizing my empathy to cover up a felony. What is your plan, Sarah? Kevin's birthday barbecue is this Saturday. I explained the strategy forming clearly in my mind. He thrives on an audience. He will not keep a $90,000 sports car hidden behind a closed garage door when he has 30 guests arriving to celebrate him. He will want it parked in the driveway for everyone to see. Carol let out a low, appreciative chuckle. You are going to use the party as bait. I confirmed. But I need to be there to ensure he brings it out. I need to RSVP. I will be there, Carol declared, the anticipation evident in her tone. I wouldn't miss this for the world. I promised to keep my mouth shut, but I am bringing my own lawn chair to watch the fallout. You handle the logistics, I will handle the audience. The power dynamic shifted fundamentally in that moment. I was no longer the isolated scapegoat facing a united family front. I had an ally, and more importantly, I had a witness who held influence over the entire extended network. Tom and Susan's smear campaign had backfired, arming the sharpest tongue in the family with explosive truth. I opened the messaging app on my phone and drafted a reply to Susan's passive-aggressive invitation. I will be there at noon. Looking forward to celebrating Kevin. The response was brief, non-committal, and devoid of the apology she demanded. It was enough to secure my entry into the lion's den. Saturday morning arrived with a crisp, clear blue sky. The humidity had broken, leaving behind a pristine Carolina summer day. It was the kind of weather designed for suburban barbecues and relaxed celebrations. I did not dress for a celebration. I dressed for a corporate execution. I bypassed the floral sundresses hanging in my closet. Instead, I selected a sharp-tailored navy blue blazer, a crisp white blouse, and dark denim jeans. I pulled my hair back into a sleek, functional knot. I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was not a compliant daughter seeking approval. She was a professional executing a tactical operation. I slipped the small black valet key into the right pocket of the blazer. I walked out to my car and started the engine. The drive to the suburbs felt entirely different this time. The anxiety that had choked me during the previous trip was gone, replaced by a cold, singular focus. I was not going to argue. I was not going to plead for my financial freedom. I was going to retrieve it. As I merged onto the interstate, my phone vibrated against the center console. I glanced down. A text message from Vince, the lead skip tracer at the recovery agency. Asset recovery team is positioned 2 blocks from the target location. We have the heavy-duty rig on standby awaiting visual confirmation of the target. Do you have eyes on the asset yet? I typed a quick reply while keeping my eyes on the road. I am 5 minutes out. Hold your position until I send the signal. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. The trap was primed. The hounds were waiting. I was driving into a party of 30 people who had been fed a diet of lies, conditioned to view me as a dramatic, ungrateful villain intent on ruining a joyful family gathering. They expected a scene. They expected tears and apologies. The true challenge lay ahead. How would I navigate a yard full of hostile relatives, keep my composure under the weight of their judgment, and maneuver the golden child into exposing his stolen prize to the waiting recovery agents? I turned onto my parents' street, the tires of my reliable sedan humming against the smooth asphalt. The thick, humid summer heat hung low over the neighborhood. But the scene unfolding at my childhood home was carefully curated to defy the elements. Cars lined both sides of the road belonging to 30 guests who had come to worship at the altar of my brother. I parked a full block away and walked the remaining distance, the gravel crunching beneath my boots. As the sprawling brick facade came into view, a sharp, cold spike of triumph pierced through my chest. The bait had been taken. Positioned at the very front of the wide stamped concrete driveway displayed like a museum exhibit sat the $90,000 silver Corvette. The midday sun glinted off its polished hood, creating a blinding halo. Kevin had brought his stolen trophy out of the dark. Before I even reached the manicured front walkway, the heavy front door swung open. Susan hurried down the stone steps, her heels clicking a frantic, uneven rhythm. She wore a tailored floral sundress that projected maternal warmth, but her eyes were flat, calculating stones. She intercepted me on the path, grabbing my arm, her manicured nails digging deep into the fabric of my navy blazer. She pulled me close, forcing a wide, photogenic smile for the benefit of a nosy neighbor watering petunias across the street. "You will put on a happy face today, Sarah." Susan hissed the words slipping out from between clenched teeth. "You will mingle. You will smile. You will not mention the money, the credit scores, or your recent tantrums. We are celebrating your brother. Do not ruin this gathering." I looked down at her hand gripping my sleeve. I did not pull away. I simply stared at her fingers until she felt the chill of my silence and released her hold. "I brought a gift," I replied, keeping my voice perfectly level as I patted the pocket where the small black valet key rested. "I am sure he will never forget it." I walked past her, following the sound of clinking glasses and loud laughter toward the backyard patio. The space was a masterclass in middle-class pretense. Paper lanterns hung from the sprawling branches of a giant oak tree. Catered trays of smoked brisket and grilled vegetables covered long wooden tables. Guests stood in small clusters holding craft beers and sweating glasses of iced tea. At the center of it all stood Kevin. He wore linen trousers and a crisp polo shirt, holding court with a group of young men and a few of my father's business associates. He was gesturing wildly, spinning tall tales about blockchain yields, decentralized assets, and leveraging capital. I navigated the crowd, keeping my posture rigid. I sidestepped a group of laughing cousins and froze in my tracks. Standing near the outdoor brick fireplace, swirling a glass of amber bourbon, was Ethan, my former fiancé. He wore a pressed button-down shirt, leaning in close to listen to one of Tom's golf partners. The sheer audacity of his presence sent a shockwave of disgust through my veins. He had packed his bags and abandoned me when I refused to absorb the debt. Yet here he was, drinking my father's liquor, trying to network his way into a lucrative actuarial contract. He wanted to sever ties with the scapegoat but keep the benefits of the golden child's ecosystem. Ethan caught my eye across the patio. He offered a tight, patronizing nod as if we were mere acquaintances running into each other at a corporate mixer. I did not nod back. I looked right through him, turning my gaze to the far corner of the yard. Sitting in a shaded wicker chair separate from the main throng was Aunt Carol. She wore a wide-brimmed straw hat and oversized sunglasses, sipping iced tea from a condensation-covered highball glass. She watched the party with the intense, hawkish scrutiny of a theater critic waiting for the final act of a tragedy. When she saw me, the corner of her mouth twitched upward in a microscopic smirk. She raised her glass an inch in silent salute. The narrative my parents had spun about my supposed mental breakdown had not survived contact with cold, hard evidence. Carol knew the truth, and she was waiting for the scales of justice to tip. The patio grew quiet as Tom tapped a silver spoon against his crystal glass. He stood beside the grill, wrapping a heavy arm around Kevin's shoulders. "Friends, family." Tom began, his voice projecting across the manicured lawn. "We are gathered today to celebrate my son, 26 years old, and he is already conquering the market. He had a vision, he put in the work, and the results are sitting right out there in the driveway." A murmur of appreciative applause rippled through the crowd. Kevin stepped forward, taking a fresh craft beer from Susan. He raised the bottle high. "I could not have done it without the ultimate support system," Kevin announced, his chest puffed out. "My parents believed in my grind. They saw my potential when others doubted it. To the future and to family." The guests clapped louder. Glasses clinked in the summer air. Susan beamed, wiping a fake tear from her cheek. Ethan stood near the fireplace, schmoozing and laughing right along with them. They were intoxicated by their own fabricated reality. I stood near the edge of the patio table. I slipped my left hand into my blazer pocket, wrapping my fingers around the spare fob. My right hand moved under the wooden edge of the table out of sight. I held my phone, the screen glowing faintly against my palm. I opened the active text thread with Vince, the lead recovery agent. I typed out the final coordinates. "Target is exposed. The vehicle is parked at the very front of the driveway. Unobstructed access. Execute order." I hit send. The delivery receipt illuminated a fraction of a second later. I took a slow sip of sparkling water. The sun beat down on the suburban paradise. The guests were cheering. Kevin was glowing with unearned pride. Ethan was securing his new social foothold. They thought they had won. But what happens when the relentless, unforgiving weight of reality finally drives down their quiet suburban street? The upbeat country music playing from the outdoor speakers was suddenly eclipsed by a deep, guttural, mechanical roar. A heavy-duty diesel engine shifted gears right outside the front hedge. The ground beneath our feet seemed to vibrate with the sheer power of the machine. Conversations across the patio sputtered and died. Guests turned their heads toward the street, holding their craft beers in suspended animation. Through the gap in the manicured cedar bushes, flashing amber strobe lights painted the pristine siding of the house in sharp, rhythmic bursts of orange. The scent of smoked brisket was instantly overpowered by the sharp, acrid smell of diesel exhaust. The screech of air brakes signaled the arrival of a flatbed tow truck. It did not park on the street to negotiate. The driver threw the rig into reverse. The warning beeps echoed like a countdown clock, piercing the quiet suburban atmosphere, and the heavy truck backed straight into the stamped concrete driveway. He stopped mere inches from the sleek front bumper of the silver Corvette. The intrusion was so jarring, so entirely foreign to this curated neighborhood paradise that no one moved. The spell of Kevin's triumph shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. Kevin let out a high, thin laugh that lacked any real humor. He set his beer on the nearest table, wiping his palms nervously on his linen trousers. He jogged toward the front yard, waving his arms in broad, frantic strokes as if trying to shoo away a stray dog. "You have the wrong address, buddy," Kevin shouted over the idling diesel engine. "This is a private residence. We are hosting a private event. You need to pull out of here right now before I have you towed for blocking my property." The driver's side door of the truck groaned open, a sound like tearing metal. A burly man wearing a high-visibility yellow vest and scuffed steel-toed boots stepped down onto the driveway. He did not look intimidated by the pristine lawn, the expensive catering, or the glaring guests. He held a thick metal clipboard in his calloused hand. He checked a printed sheet of paper, glanced at the license plate of the sports car, and looked back at my brother. "I have the right address. the agent said, his voice booming effortlessly over the engine noise. "I am looking for the keys to this vehicle. It is marked for immediate recovery due to a fraudulent loan default." The phrase hung in the thick summer air. Fraudulent loan default. The color drained from Kevin's face, leaving his tan looking sallow and sickly. He stood frozen, staring at the repo agent as if the man had just spoken a foreign language. The guests' murmuring turned into shocked, hushed whispers. People exchanged confused, rapid glances. Tom pushed his way through the crowd. His face flushed a deep, furious red. He marched down the front stone steps, puffing out his chest to project the authority he wielded in boardrooms and country clubs. He pointed a rigid finger at the driver, his jaw set in a hard line. "Listen to me very carefully," Tom commanded, using his most intimidating corporate tone. "You are trespassing on private property. You are disrupting a family gathering. You have exactly 10 seconds to get that truck out of my driveway, or I am calling the police to have you arrested." The repo agent did not blink. He unclipped a document from his board and held it up toward the afternoon sun. "The police are the ones who authorized this recovery, sir." The driver deadpanned, his expression entirely bored by the threat. "This vehicle is tied to an active felony identity theft investigation out of Mecklenburg County. The sheriff gave us the green light 20 minutes ago. They are standing by if you decide to obstruct this seizure. Now, are you going to hand over the fob, or do I have to drag this luxury ride onto the flatbed with the winch and risk scraping the undercarriage?" Susan let out a piercing shriek from the patio steps, dropping her crystal wine glass. It shattered against the brick dark red liquid pooling like blood around her designer sandals. She grabbed the porch railing, her knuckles turning white. Her socialite mask slipped entirely, revealing raw, naked panic. She looked at her friends, her eyes wide, realizing the facade she spent decades building was burning down in real time. Near the outdoor brick fireplace, Ethan proved his true character once again. He took a slow, calculated step backward, sliding behind a large potted fern. He kept his head down, doing everything in his power to distance himself from the public embarrassment. He wanted the prestige of marrying into a wealthy family, but he fled at the first scent of consequences. He was a coward retreating into the foliage. "I cannot give you the keys." Kevin stammered, his bravado entirely evaporated. He patted his pockets, his breathing growing shallow and rapid. "The car belongs to me. My name is on the registration. You cannot just take it. It is a simple misunderstanding with the bank. I need to make a phone call. Just give me 5 minutes to clear this up with my broker." He was stalling. He thought he could talk his way out of a federal crime the same way he talked his way out of crashing my old sedan years ago. He believed his charm could override a court order. I stepped away from the patio table, walking slowly down the stone path until I stood in plain view of the driveway, the tow truck, and my panicked family. Kevin refused to surrender his prize. He stood defensively in front of the sleek hood, a ruined captain going down with his stolen ship. I reached into the right pocket of my navy blazer. My fingers brushed the smooth plastic of the spare fob he had so arrogantly tossed at me weeks ago in my kitchen. He bragged he had too many keys to keep track of. He was about to have one less. I pulled it out, gripping it tight. "Hey!" I called out, my voice clear and steady, cutting effortlessly through the murmurs of the stunned party guests. The repo agent looked past my brother, his eyes locking onto me. I raised my hand and tossed the valet key over Kevin's head. The small black plastic fob sailed through the humid air in a perfect, satisfying arc. The driver reached up and caught it effortlessly in his weathered palm. "Thank you, ma'am." The driver nodded. He turned his back on my speechless father and brother, pressing the unlock button. The Corvette chirped twice, the headlights flashing in submission. The hydraulic lift engaged with a sharp mechanical whine securing the physical asset. But the metal and rubber being hauled away was the least of their problems. The $90,000 prop was gone, leaving the ugly truth sitting in plain sight. I turned to look at the 30 guests staring wide-eyed at the spectacle. How would Tom and Susan attempt to spin a confirmed felony to the very audience they had spent decades trying to impress? The sharp electronic chirp of the Corvette unlocking acted as a starter pistol for the ensuing chaos. Kevin, his prized asset slipping from his grasp in front of his intended audience, turned his panic into venom. He lunged toward me, his face twisted in a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. "You ruined my life," he screamed, his voice cracking, spittle flying from his lips. "You sabotaged my business. You are just a jealous, bitter failure who cannot stand seeing anyone else succeed." He raised his arm, his hands curling into fists, advancing until he was mere inches from my face. I did not flinch. I stood my ground, my posture rigid, my eyes locked onto his. He expected fear. He expected the compliant sister who always absorbed the blows. The woman standing before him was forged in the fire of his own greed. Tom realized the severity of the situation. The corporate facade was crumbling, and his instinct was to hide the evidence. He reached out his thick fingers, grabbing my upper arm in a vice grip. "Get inside the house, Sarah," Tom commanded. His voice a low, dangerous growl meant only for my ears. "We are dealing with this in private. You have embarrassed this family enough." His grip was tight, threatening to bruise, attempting to physically drag me away from the peering eyes of his golf partners and country club associates. He was desperate to contain the explosion. Before I could pry his hand off my arm, a sharp, authoritative voice sliced through the tension. "Take your hands off her, Tom." Aunt Carol stepped off the patio, her heels sinking slightly into the manicured grass. She marched right into the center of the fray, her straw hat casting a long shadow over her face. She held a thick manila folder tucked under her arm. The matriarch of the family gossip mill had arrived to deliver her verdict. Tom dropped his hand, startled by his older sister's sudden interference. "Carol, stay out of this. It is a private matter. Sarah is having a manic episode." Carol let out a sharp, humorless bark of laughter. "A manic episode? Is that what we are calling felony wire fraud these days?" She opened the manila folder. The 30 guests standing in stunned silence leaned in closer, drawn by the undeniable gravity of the confrontation. Carol pulled out a stack of stapled papers. They were crisp black and white copies of the official Mecklenburg County Police report I had sent her days ago. Carol did not whisper. She projected her voice, ensuring every single person in the backyard heard her clearly. My brother and his wife hacked their daughter's email account, Carol announced, waving the police report in the air. They forged her electronic signature to secure a $90,000 auto loan so this lazy boy could pretend to be a cryptocurrency mogul on the internet. They let the bank garnish her nursing wages, risking her medical license, all to cover their tracks. Tom went pale. The color drained from his face as the murmurs swept through his friends. He reached for the papers in Carol's hand, but she swiftly stepped back, passing the top copy to a wide-eyed neighbor who eagerly accepted it. "Do not take her word for it," Carol instructed, handing out the copies like flyers on a street corner. "Read the police report. Look at the court order. Look at the forged signatures. The evidence is right there in black and white." The secret was exposed. Stripped bare in the harsh afternoon light, the curated illusion of the perfect upper-middle-class family was reduced to a pile of legal documents detailing their theft. Susan, realizing the smear campaign had failed spectacularly, resorted to her final defense mechanism. She collapsed dramatically into a wicker patio chair, She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders heaving with performative sobs. "We only did it because we love our children." Susan wailed, her voice carrying a theatrical, trembling pitch. "We were trying to help him build a future. We're desperate. We made a mistake, but it was born of love. We would do anything for our family." The patio fell silent, save for the mechanical whine of the tow truck preparing to lift the Corvette. The guests looked uncomfortable, caught between the damning legal evidence and a mother's tearful breakdown. I looked at Susan, the woman who had spent my entire life teaching me that my worth was conditional. The anger I expected to feel was absent. Instead, a profound, chilling clarity washed over me. "You love him," I said, my voice steady, carrying clearly across the silent yard. "You only used me. You sacrificed my future to fund his illusion." Susan looked up, her mascara smeared, her expression faltering as she realized her tears held no power over me. Tom stood frozen, staring at the copies of the police report circulating among his peers. He was ruined in his community. A loud hydraulic hiss drew everyone's attention back to the driveway. The repo agent had secured the winch. The metal cables pulled taut, dragging the low-profile sports car onto the angled flatbed. The scrape of the front bumper against the metal ramp was a brutal, ugly sound. The $90,000 symbol of the Golden Child status was hoisted into the air, suspended like a trophy before being clamped down. Kevin watched his fake empire roll away. The bravado, the arrogance, the unearned superiority evaporated. He dropped to his knees right there on the paved driveway, his designer jeans scraping against the concrete. He stared at the disappearing taillights, a broken scammer stripped of his soul-defining asset. The tow truck shifted into drive, the diesel engine roaring as it pulled away from the curb, taking Kevin's false identity with it. The neighborhood grew quiet again. I turned my back on the yard. I did not offer a goodbye. I did not look back at my weeping mother, my disgraced father, or my kneeling brother. I walked down the driveway, my boots hitting the pavement with a rhythmic, victorious cadence. I had burned the toxic family dynamic to the ground, claiming my financial and emotional freedom in the ashes. I reached my dependable sedan parked a block away, unlocking the door. The operation was a success. The cancer was excised. But as I reached for the door handle, rapid footsteps pounded on the pavement behind me. Someone was desperately trying to crawl back into my life before the smoke cleared. The heat radiating off the asphalt felt entirely different now. It was no longer oppressive. It was purifying. I walked down the long, winding suburban street toward my parked sedan, each step placing a definitive distance between myself and the smoldering wreckage of my family's reputation. Behind me, the muffled sounds of the ruined barbecue continued, a chaotic symphony of hurried whispers and the slamming of a front door. Aunt Carol had done her job flawlessly, ensuring the truth was disseminated to every corner of the neighborhood. The isolation I had felt for the past 3 weeks was gone, replaced by a fierce, undeniable autonomy. As I neared my vehicle, the rapid, rhythmic slap of leather dress shoes against the pavement broke the quiet. Someone was running. "Sarah. Wait, just hold on a second." I knew that voice. It was the voice that had promised me a future over a candlelit dinner. It was the voice that had coldly calculated my financial ruin to secure a luxury car title. I stopped, turning slowly. Ethan jogged up to me, slightly out of breath, his tailored shirt clinging to his chest in the summer humidity. He ran a hand through his carefully styled hair, attempting to project an image of earnest desperation. The corporate schmoozing he had engaged in minutes prior was forgotten. He had witnessed the execution. He had seen the illusion of Tom's wealth shatter, but in doing so, he had witnessed something else. He saw me stand against a unified front of manipulation and emerge victorious. To an opportunist like Ethan, sudden strength was a new kind of currency. He wanted to reinvest.
"Sarah, I'm so sorry."
Ethan panted, his chest heaving. He reached out his fingers, brushing the fabric of my navy blazer, attempting to grab my hand. I pulled my arm back, a sharp, instinctive recoil. His hand hung in the empty space between us.
"Do not touch me,"
I said, my tone flat, stripped of any residual affection. Ethan swallowed hard, adjusting his stance.
"I panicked. Okay, I was wrong. I see that now. The debt, the fraud, your father threatening you. It was overwhelming.
I am an actuary. I look at risk and my brain short-circuited. I just needed time to process the variables. But seeing you back there, seeing you stand up to them, it was incredible. You handled that like a professional." He was attempting to rewrite history, framing his cowardly retreat as an analytical pause. He wanted to repackage his abandonment as a temporary lapse in judgment.
"You did not need time to process,"
I corrected him, my gaze locking onto his shifting eyes.
"You needed time to see who would win. You wanted the prestige of my family when you thought they were wealthy. You wanted the Corvette when you thought you could steal the title. And when I refused to play the victim, you packed a duffel bag and told me I was a liability. You only respect power when it is standing right in front of you."
Ethan shifted his weight, a brief flash of irritation crossing his features before he forced it down.
"We can fix this, Sarah. You cleared your name. The car is gone. The debt is off your credit report. We are back to square one. We can go back to the apartment right now. We can sit down, open a bottle of wine, and look at those wedding venues. We can get the mortgage application reinstated on Monday. Our timeline is still intact." His timeline. That was the only variable that mattered to him. He viewed our relationship as a spreadsheet, and he was trying to balance the equations. I looked at him, truly seeing the man I had almost tethered my life to. He was handsome, ambitious, and entirely hollow. I dropped my gaze, catching a glimpse of the dark-tinted window of a parked SUV beside us. "You know what is truly pathetic, Ethan?"
I asked, my voice dropping to a quiet, devastating register.
"What?"
he asked, his brow furrowing in confusion.
"I saw you check your reflection in the window of that Mercedes right before you jogged over here,"
I stated, pointing to the shiny black vehicle.
"Your fiancée just watched her parents get exposed for a felony, her brother lose his fake empire, and her childhood home turn into a crime scene. And your first instinct before running after me to apologize was to make sure your hair looked good. You do not want a partner. You want an accessory."
The color drained from Ethan's face. His mouth opened, but no words came out. The calculated charm he relied upon had hit a brick wall. The realization dawned on him that I was not a puzzle he could solve with the right combination of apologies and promises.
"The engagement ring is still exactly where you left it, sitting on the kitchen counter," I told him, unlocking my car door. "But the locks on the apartment have already been changed." "Wait, you cannot do that,"
Ethan protested, genuine panic finally bleeding into his voice.
"My stuff is still in there. My suits, my computer. The lease is solely in my name," I reminded him, relishing the cold, hard fact of my financial independence. "I paid the deposit. I pay the rent. You can text me a list of your belongings. I will pack them in boxes and leave them with the building manager. Do not ever try to contact me again." I climbed into the driver's seat and pulled the heavy door shut, sealing myself inside the quiet cabin.
Ethan stood on the sidewalk, a solitary figure stranded in the suffocating heat, watching his calculated investment drive away. I started the engine and gripped the steering wheel. My heart was beating a steady, calm rhythm. I looked down at my left hand resting on the leather curve.
My thumb automatically drifted toward my left wrist, seeking out the faded white scar, the physical manifestation of my childhood guilt. I paused. My fingers hovered over the old wound. For the first time in my life, there was no anxiety to soothe. There was no blame to shoulder. The frantic need to apologize for existing to absorb the shock waves of other people's mistakes had vanished. I lowered my hand, resting it flat against my thigh. The generational trauma, the conditioned response to my family's manipulation, was broken. I shifted the car into drive and pulled away from the curb, leaving my childhood suburb in the rearview mirror. I was free of the dead weight. The toxic relationships that had anchored me were severed. But while I was driving toward a clear horizon, the storm I had unleashed was just beginning to make landfall behind me. The Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Department had the police report. The auto lender had the physical evidence. What happens when the federal government catches up to the digital paper trail left by Tom and Susan? The weekend passed in a state of surreal calm. I spent Sunday deep cleaning my apartment, scrubbing the physical remnants of Ethan from the counters and packing his belongings into neat, sterile cardboard boxes. I left them with the building superintendent erasing his presence from my sanctuary. The silence in the rooms was no longer lonely. It was expansive. I had reclaimed my space, but the bureaucratic gears of justice I had set in motion were just beginning to grind. When you commit a crime involving $90,000 electronic signatures and the interstate banking system, you are no longer dealing with a local misdemeanor. The theft transcends a family dispute. It becomes a federal issue. On Monday morning, Tom drove to his corporate office complex, anticipating a normal day of quarterly reviews and mid-level management meetings. He parked in his designated spot, likely formulating a strategy to salvage his reputation among the golf partners who had witnessed the repossession. He thought he could spin the narrative smooth over the jagged edges of reality with practiced charm. He was entirely unprepared for the two detectives waiting in the reception area. They did not ask for a private meeting. They approached him in front of his administrative staff, their badges displayed clearly on their belts. The auto lender had escalated the forged e-signature documents to the Financial Crimes Division. Because the electronic contract was executed over an internet protocol network crossing state lines to a national bank, the charge was upgraded to federal wire fraud, the corporate facade. Tom had spent 3 decades meticulously building, shattered the moment the detectives asked him to step outside for questioning regarding identity theft. The rumor mill in a corporate office operates with lethal efficiency. By noon, his superiors were aware of the active investigation. A senior manager facing federal fraud charges is a walking liability. Tom was escorted from the building and placed on immediate indefinite administrative leave, pending the outcome of the criminal probe. The prospect of federal prison time has a unique way of eroding loyalty. Faced with the stark reality of losing his pension and his freedom, Tom's protective instincts vanished. He did not shield his wife. He did not absorb the blame to protect the matriarch of his family. He sat in an interrogation room and offered a desperate plea deal. He pointed the finger squarely at Susan. He claimed she was the one who manipulated the IP addresses, accessed the dormant email accounts, and executed the forged signatures. He portrayed himself as an ignorant bystander, an innocent father who simply co-signed a document he believed his daughter had authorized. The betrayal fractured their marriage instantly. Susan, facing the very real threat of indictment, retaliated with equal venom. She accused Tom of orchestrating the entire scheme to save face at the country club, claiming he bullied her into executing the technical components. The united front of manipulation that had governed our family for 28 years collapsed into a vicious, ugly war of self-preservation. They turned on each other like starved animals fighting over the scraps of a ruined legacy.
While Tom and Susan tore each other apart in legal battles, the golden child experienced his own rapid descent. Kevin's digital empire relied entirely on the visual illusion of wealth. The $90,000 sports car was the anchor of his cryptocurrency pyramid scheme. Without the prop, the illusion evaporated. The guests who had attended the barbecue did not keep the secret. The video of the repossession captured on a neighbor's security camera circulated quietly but swiftly through local social circles. The news of the fraud reached his online followers. The internet is a brutal, unforgiving arena for scammers who get exposed. His comment sections flooded with accusations. His paid subscribers canceled their memberships en masse, demanding refunds. The revenue stream dried up overnight. Stripped of his car, his audience, and his unearned superiority, Kevin could not maintain the lease on his upscale apartment. Less than a month after the party, he packed his designer clothes into garbage bags and moved back into his childhood bedroom. He was 26 years old, branded a fraud, living in the basement of a house fractured by impending federal indictments. The social isolation was absolute. Aunt Carol fulfilled her promise. She mobilized the extended family network, presenting the undeniable evidence of the theft. Cousins, aunts, and uncles who had once praised Kevin and tolerated Susan's snobbery severed ties completely. My parents were uninvited from Thanksgiving dinners, weddings, and holiday gatherings. They became pariahs, ostracized by the very community they had sacrificed my future to impress. The desperation culminated on a rainy Tuesday evening. I was sitting in my living room reading a book, the soft glow of a table lamp casting warm shadows across the walls. My phone vibrated against the coffee table. The caller ID displayed Susan's number. I did not answer. I let it ring, watching the screen illuminate the dark room until the call rolled over to voicemail. A few minutes later, the notification chime sounded. I set my book down, picked up the phone, and pressed play. Susan's voice filled the quiet apartment. She was not using her authoritative, manipulative tone. She was weeping a raw, hysterical sound devoid of any composure. "Sarah, please," she sobbed, the audio distorting slightly. "You have to call the bank. You have to drop the charges. They suspended your father. We are going to lose the house to pay the legal fees. Kevin is so depressed. He will not leave his room. Please, Sarah. I am begging you. We are your family. You cannot do this to us." I listened to the message in its entirety. I heard the desperation, the fear, and the profound consequence of their actions. They were drowning in the exact ocean of anxiety they had callously thrown me into. I felt no pity. I felt no urge to rescue them. I tapped the screen and deleted the voicemail. I blocked her number. Their empire of lies had burned to the ground, leaving nothing but ash and recrimination. The karmic justice was swift and absolute. I had survived the fire they set, but while the perpetrators were facing their ruin, I was still standing in the wreckage of my financial profile. The debt was frozen, but the derogatory marks remained. How long would it take to untangle the bureaucratic nightmare, rebuild the pristine credit score they stole, and reclaim the life I had worked so hard to build? The transition from autumn to winter in Charlotte brought a crisp, biting chill to the air, mirroring the cold, methodical approach I applied to rebuilding my life. I spent my evenings sitting at my small dining table, the surface covered in manila envelopes, certified mail receipts, and printed legal statutes. Reclaiming a stolen financial identity is not a swift or glamorous process. It requires relentless, stubborn patience. The federal investigation handled my parents, but fixing the algorithmic damage to my name fell entirely on my shoulders. I drafted meticulous dispute letters to the 3 major credit bureaus. I attached the Mecklenburg County Police report, the federal wire fraud case number provided by the detectives, and the official liability discharge letter from the auto lender.
I sent every parcel via certified mail, tracking the delivery updates like a hawk watching its prey. I spent countless hours on hold with indifferent customer service representatives, navigating endless automated menus, refusing to let a single unauthorized inquiry remain on my permanent record. Weeks bled into months. The leaves outside my apartment window shifted from vibrant copper to brittle brown, eventually washing away in the heavy November rains. Every Friday morning, I brewed a cup of black coffee and logged into my secure financial portal. At first, the needle barely moved. The banking system is inherently designed to penalize the victim long before it corrects an internal error. Then a breakthrough arrived shortly after Thanksgiving. A formal dispute resolved in my favor. The $90,000 delinquent auto loan vanished from my history, deleted as if it had never existed. I refreshed the browser. My score jumped. 510 climbed instantly to 640. 2 weeks later, another bureau updated their registry, pushing the number to 720. By the time the new year rolled around, the pristine 780 returned to my screen. A month later, reflecting my newly lowered debt ratio and flawless payment history, the number ticked upward to an immaculate 800. The numerical reflection of my discipline was restored untouchable and secure. The restoration of my personal life mirrored a rapid professional ascent. I walked the polished corridors of Charlotte General Hospital with a renewed quiet authority. I no longer volunteered for exhausting back-to-back double shifts out of a desperate need to fund Ethan's lifestyle. I worked my standard rotations, pouring my focus into patient care rather than sheer financial survival. The constant low-grade panic that used to hum in my veins had evaporated. I administered medications, comforted frightened parents, and charted vitals with a clear, unburdened mind. Patricia, the human resources director, summoned me back to her office in late February. I walked through the administrative wing and took a seat in the same stiff chair where she had previously handed me a career-ending wage garnishment threat. This time, the atmosphere was entirely different. Her posture was relaxed, a genuine smile crinkling the corners of her eyes. She slid a single thick sheet of high-quality paper across the polished oak desk. It was an official offer letter for the head floor nurse position. Patricia leaned forward, clasping her hands together. She cited my unblemished clinical record, my calm leadership during crisis situations on the ward, and the remarkable resilience I had demonstrated over the past year. She told me the hospital administration recognized talent that could endure under pressure. I read the salary figure printed on the contract. It was a substantial increase, but the validation carried far more weight than the money. I signed the document right there in her office using my favorite blue pen. I had secured my own future anchored by my own merit. I maintained a healthy, impenetrable distance from the wreckage in the suburbs, relying solely on Aunt Carol for necessary updates. We met for lunch at a quiet, upscale bistro overlooking the river. Carol ordered a glass of chilled Chardonnay and delivered the post-mortem on my brother's shattered illusion. Kevin had hit absolute rock bottom, stripped of his fake digital empire and the luxury prop that fueled it. He was forced to abandon his entrepreneurial delusions. He had to secure a minimum wage logistics job just to contribute to his mounting legal defense fund. Carol took a sip of her wine, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of pity and vindication. She told me he was currently driving a rusted 1998 Honda Civic with a mismatched passenger door and a failing transmission. Carol pulled her smartphone from her designer purse, tapping the screen before sliding it across the white tablecloth. She showed me a screenshot of Kevin's latest social media post. He was standing beside the dented, faded compact car, complaining bitterly to his few remaining followers. His caption was a long,
Rambling paragraph about how the corporate system is rigged against true visionary thinkers claiming the government targets innovators who try to break the mold. I looked at the photograph of the golden child leaning against a vehicle worth less than the tires on his repossessed Corvette. I searched my heart for a flicker of sympathy, searching for a remnant of the sisterly duty Susan had spent decades programming into my psyche. I found nothing. The emotional well was bone dry, replaced by a solid foundation of self-respect. He was finally experiencing the real world, devoid of safety nets and stolen subsidies. I handed the phone back to Carol. I took a bite of my grilled salmon, asked about her upcoming garden renovations, and changed the subject. The chapter on Kevin was permanently closed. Spring arrived, bringing a fresh, vibrant energy to the city. The cherry blossoms bloomed along the riverfront. My bank accounts were healthy. My professional life was thriving. Yet the walls of my rented apartment began to feel temporary. I had excised the toxic elements of my past, clearing the debris from my foundation, but I had not yet built a permanent structure over it. I spent my Sunday mornings browsing local property listings, sipping coffee while studying neighborhood maps, property taxes, and fixed interest rates. I was healing methodically, piecing together a life designed strictly on my own terms. The preparation was complete. The credit was immaculate, but lingering questions remained as I scheduled my first property viewing. Would I find a sanctuary to truly call my own? Would I finally sign my real name to a future I actually wanted? Or would the ghosts of my family's betrayal make me hesitate at the threshold? The morning sunlight angled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the real estate firm, casting warm geometric shapes across the polished hardwood floor. I sat in a plush leather chair, breathing in the scent of fresh coffee and expensive paper. The environment felt entirely different from the sterile fluorescent-lit mortgage office I had occupied a year ago. I was not flanked by a panicked fiancé whose loyalty depended on my utility. My chest did not tighten with the dread of undiscovered debt or impending betrayal. I sat alone, holding a heavy brass pen, reviewing the final closing documents for my new home. The broker, a cheerful woman named Diane with sharp features and a warm smile, flipped to the last page of the thick stack. She smoothed the paper flat and tapped her manicured fingernail against the bottom line. "Your financial profile is impeccable, Sarah," Diane said, her tone carrying genuine professional admiration. "An 800 credit score makes my job exceptionally easy. The underwriters pushed this through faster than any file I have seen this quarter. You locked in a beautiful interest rate." I looked at the dotted line. A year ago, my name had been forged in digital ink, weaponized by my own blood to steal my future. I had spent 12 months fighting federal bureaucracies and credit agencies to scrub the stain of their greed from my record. Today, I pressed the brass pen to the thick paper. I signed my actual signature. The loops and arcs flowed from my hand, a deliberate binding declaration of ownership. I pushed the contract across the desk. Diane smiled, reached into her blazer pocket, and handed me a single silver key. The transaction was finished. I owned a piece of the world. I drove my reliable sedan to my new property located in a quiet, established suburb. It was close enough to the city for my hospital commute, but miles away from the pretentious community where my parents had staged their downfall. I parked in the driveway and turned off the engine. The house was a modest, charming 3-bedroom craftsman with a wide front porch and peeling white paint on the window trim. It needed work, but it possessed a distinct, undeniable soul. I walked up the front steps, the wooden boards creaking a welcoming greeting under my boots. The real treasure of the property lay in the backyard. I unlocked the side gate and stepped into my private sanctuary. The garden was an overgrown, chaotic riot of color and texture. Wildflowers pushed through the uneven brick pathways, refusing to be contained. Untrimmed rose bushes tangled with climbing ivy along the wooden fence. It was untamed, vibrant, and perfectly imperfect. It stood in stark defiance of Susan's sterile, meticulously engineered lawn. My mother used her landscaping as a weapon, poisoning the soil with chemicals to project a flawless illusion of superiority to her neighbors. I intended to let my garden grow wild. I wanted the bees and the unruly vines. It would be a living testament to the beauty of uncurated freedom. The following Saturday, a moving truck pulled up to the curb. I did not hire a corporate crew of strangers to handle my belongings. My chosen family arrived to carry the heavy loads. Several nurses from the pediatric ward showed up wearing comfortable sweatpants, carrying boxes of fresh pastries and carafes of strong coffee. Aunt Carol drove her luxury SUV up the street, stepping out in a casual tracksuit, clutching a clipboard to direct the manual labor. Carol orchestrated the unloading process with her usual sharp efficiency, barking logistical orders with a warm, affectionate grin. The house quickly filled with loud laughter, the heavy thud of cardboard boxes hitting the floorboards, and the rich scent of roasted coffee. We hauled heavy wooden furniture up the porch steps, unpacked kitchen supplies, and shared stories over a lunch of delivered pizzas. There were no hidden agendas in these rooms. There was no transactional affection or unspoken scorekeeping. The people sweating in my new living room were there because they valued my presence, not my credit limit. We built a home out of shared effort and genuine connection. By 8 o'clock, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Carolina sky in deep shades of bruised purple and burning orange. My friends departed one by one, leaving behind a trail of warm hugs and promises to return soon for a proper housewarming party. I stood on the porch and waved until the last car turned the corner. I stepped back inside and locked the front door. The deadbolt clicked into place, a heavy, definitive sound that echoed through the hallway. I walked into the center of the empty living room. I had not yet unrolled the woven rugs or assembled the velvet sofa. The original hardwood floor was bare, scarred by decades of previous lives. I sat cross-legged on the wood, opening a cardboard box of takeout noodles. The house was quiet. It was not the tense, suffocating silence that follows a bitter family argument. It was a rich, breathable quiet. I listened to the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the gentle rustle of the wind moving through the overgrown oak trees outside my front window. I took a bite of my dinner, savoring the simple, uncomplicated flavor. I owned the walls around me. I controlled the locks. The generational cycle of manipulation and financial abuse had stopped permanently at my doorstep. I was secure. I finished my meal and leaned back against the freshly painted drywall. The story felt resolved. I had reclaimed my stolen identity, secured a major professional promotion, and purchased my own sanctuary. The bitter battles were fought and definitively won. I closed my eyes, letting the profound sense of safety wash over my tired muscles. The villains of my past were dealing with the consequences of their own deceit far removed from my daily reality. Yet the universe operates with a distinct ironic sense of humor. Sometimes justice is not merely satisfied with survival and peace. Sometimes it insists on delivering a final poetic punchline to tie up the remaining loose threads. I did not know it as I drifted to sleep on my living room floor, but a final piece of karmic retribution was already in motion, scheduled to arrive right outside my new front door the very next morning. The first Sunday morning in my new home arrived with a gentle golden light filtering through the overgrown oak trees in the front yard. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of damp soil and blooming honeysuckle from the wild garden I had resolved to protect. I sat on the wide wooden porch, wrapped in a thick knit sweater, a steaming mug of black coffee resting in my hands. The neighborhood was quiet, the only sounds the distant hum of a lawnmower and the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze. I felt a profound settling peace. The chaos of the past year had finally receded into memory, leaving behind a clean, solid foundation. Then the low, powerful purr of an expensive engine broke the Sunday stillness. I looked up from my coffee. A sleek midnight blue sports car turned onto my quiet street. It glided past the modest craftsman homes and parked directly across from my driveway. For a split second, a cold spike of adrenaline shot through my chest. The silhouette of the low-profile vehicle triggered an immediate visceral reaction. I gripped the ceramic mug tighter, my mind flashing to Kevin and the silver Corvette that had nearly destroyed my life. I half expected my brother to step out armed with another scheme, another demand, or another unearned sense of entitlement. The driver's side door opened, but it was not Kevin who stepped onto the pavement. The man who emerged was in his late 50s, dressed impeccably in a tailored charcoal blazer and dark slacks. He wore a silver watch that caught the morning light and possessed the relaxed, confident posture of someone accustomed to commanding attention without raising his voice. He glanced at the open house sign planted in the yard of the property across the street, consulting a digital tablet in his hand. He was touring the neighborhood, evaluating real estate. He turned toward my house, his gaze sweeping over the peeling white paint of my porch and the reliable paid-off sedan sitting in my driveway. He paused, his brow furrowing slightly as he looked at me. A spark of recognition flashed in his eyes. He lowered the tablet and crossed the quiet street, his leather shoes clicking against the asphalt.
"Excuse me,"
he said, his voice smooth and professional.
"You are Sarah Brown."
"Are you not the pediatric nurse?" I set my coffee mug on the wooden railing, standing up slowly. I did not recognize him, but my guard was instinctively raised. "Yes, I am Sarah," I replied cautiously. "How do you know my name?" The man offered a polite, apologetic smile. "Forgive the intrusion. My name is David Vance. No relation to your former fiancé, I assure you. I own Prestige Auto Imports over in Charlotte." The name of the dealership hit me like a physical blow. Prestige Auto Imports. It was the exact dealership printed on the forged electronic loan documents. It was the business that had authorized the $90,000 transaction using my stolen identity. I tensed, preparing for another legal battle, wondering if the financial institution was attempting to claw back losses. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice dropping to a defensive register. "The fraud investigation was closed. The lender discharged the liability." "I am not here on business," David said quickly, raising his hands in a placating gesture. "And I certainly do not want to cause you any distress. I recognized you from the local news reports and the internal legal briefings our dealership had to review regarding the wire fraud case. I actually owe you a profound apology." An apology, I repeated, caught off guard by the admission. David nodded, his expression turning serious. The finance manager who processed that electronic signature was an old golf partner of your father. He bypassed our internal security protocols as a favor to Tom, assuming the transaction was legitimate family business. That manager was terminated the moment the Mecklenburg County detectives served us with your police report. Your father leveraged a personal relationship to bypass federal regulations. I am deeply sorry our institution was used as the vehicle for your family's theft. I looked at him, the residual anger simmering just below the surface. Your apology is noted, I said evenly, but the damage cost me a year of my life. I understand, David replied, his tone respectful. You fought a brutal battle, and you won it with remarkable integrity. But I actually wanted to share a piece of information with you, something that did not make the public court filings.
but something I thought you might find satisfying. I crossed my arms, leaning against the porch post. Satisfying how David stepped closer to the wooden steps, lowering his voice slightly as if sharing a corporate secret. When the recovery agency finally secured that silver Corvette from your father's driveway, they transported it directly to our secure holding lot for an inventory assessment. I remember the day it was repossessed. I said the memory of Kevin dropping to his knees on the concrete still vivid in my mind. David offered a dry, humorless chuckle. Did you know what your brother attempted to do in the 20 minutes before the tow truck arrived? I shook my head. My curiosity piqued. When Kevin realized the repossession was imminent and the police had authorized the seizure, he panicked, David explained. He knew the asset was gone, so he tried to salvage whatever liquid value he could extract from the vehicle before he lost physical possession. He grabbed a hydraulic jack and a lug wrench from your father's garage. He attempted to illegally strip the custom alloy rims and the high-performance tires off the Corvette right there in the driveway. I stared at David, the sheer audacity of the act rendering me momentarily speechless. He tried to steal the rims off a repossessed car while the tow truck was backing in.
Exactly,
David confirmed, shaking his head in disbelief. He managed to pull 2 rims off before the recovery agent stepped out of the truck and caught him in the act. The agent immediately reported the vandalism to the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's deputies who were standing by on the perimeter. A slow, inevitable smile began to form on my lips, because the vehicle was technically the property of the national lender. At that moment, Kevin was not just committing vandalism. David continued delivering the final poetic punchline. He was stripping assets from a federally secured collateral. That desperate, greedy move earned your brother a secondary standalone charge for grand larceny. Grand larceny? I whispered the words, tasting like vintage wine. David nodded. He is currently serving 3 years of strict probation for the theft attempt, on top of the community service mandated for his involvement in the initial wire fraud. He wanted to look like a millionaire on the internet, and he ended up legally branded a common thief for trying to steal hubcaps. The universe had not merely balanced the scales. It had crushed the perpetrators under the weight of their own arrogance. Kevin's defining flaw, his insatiable need to extract unearned value, had been the exact mechanism of his final undeniable ruin. David extended his right hand across the porch railing. I just wanted to shake the hand of the woman who took down a family of scammers and forced my dealership to tighten its security protocols. You are a formidable person, Sarah. I uncrossed my arms and shook his hand. His grip was firm and respectful. Thank you for telling me, I said, the smile now reaching my eyes. It is the closure I did not know I needed. David reached into his tailored blazer and pulled out a thick embossed business card. He set it carefully on the wooden railing next to my coffee mug.
If you ever decide to upgrade that sedan in your driveway,
David offered warmly, call my personal line. I am authorizing a genuine friends and family discount for you, cost minus 10%. No finance managers, no electronic signatures, just a reliable vehicle for a woman who earned it. I looked at the sleek midnight blue sports car idling across the street. I looked at the embossed business card resting on the railing. Then I turned my gaze to my own driveway. My 5-year-old sedan was not flashy. It did not project excessive wealth or demand attention, but it belonged to me. The title was clear. It had carried me away from a toxic past and delivered me to a sanctuary of my own making. I picked up the business card, offering David a polite, appreciative nod. I appreciate the offer, David. Truly, but I think I will stick with what I have. It is paid off and it gets me exactly where I need to be. David smiled, a genuine expression of respect.
I cannot argue with that logic.
Enjoy your Sunday, Sarah. He turned and walked back across the quiet street, slipping into his expensive car. The powerful engine purred as he drove away, disappearing around the corner, leaving the neighborhood to its peaceful Sunday stillness. I picked up my coffee mug. The ceramic was still warm. I turned my back on the street and looked at the peeling white paint of my front door. The battles were over. The debt was erased. The ghosts of my past were permanently exiled to their own self-made purgatory. I opened the door and stepped inside my house. The ultimate victor in a war I never asked for, ready to finally live the life I had built. We often believe that a family is an unshakable fortress, a sanctuary shielded from the harsh realities of the world by the unconditional love of parents. Yet as the story of Sarah reminds us, a fortress built on the shifting sands of image favoritism and deceit is destined to collapse. Sarah's journey is not just a tale of financial betrayal and identity theft. It is a profound reflection on modern American parenting, serving as a stark mirror held up to the values we unknowingly pass down to our children. It asks us to deeply examine the core of our traditional family structures and demands that we confront an uncomfortable truth. Are we raising our children with emotional awareness, fairness, and honesty? Or are we sacrificing their character on the altar of societal expectations? In the heart of American culture, there is a pervasive, almost intoxicating pull toward the appearance of success. Sarah's parents, Tom and Susan, fell victim to this modern obsession with middle-class pretense and hustle culture, a mindset where projecting an image of prosperity is valued far more than the honest, quiet hard work required to actually earn it. In their frantic pursuit of this illusion, they committed a grave parenting sin. They prioritized Kevin's luxury lifestyle over Sarah's actual livelihood. They constructed a world of illusions utilizing a stolen $90,000 prop, the Corvette, to help their son sell a completely fake digital empire to strangers on the internet. This highlights the ultimate devastating danger of the golden child dynamic. By continuously shielding Kevin from the natural consequences of his actions, a pattern dating all the way back to blaming Sarah, when a 14-year-old Kevin crashed her car, they stripped him of the opportunity to develop a moral compass. True parenting requires the difficult realization that accountability is in fact a profound form of love. Without it, children risk growing into adults who view the people around them not as human beings to be cherished, but merely as untapped family assets to be ruthlessly exploited. On the other side of this toxic dynamic lies the responsible child, the one who quietly carries the weight of the family's dysfunctions. Far too often, parents exploit the responsible scapegoat to subsidize the mistakes of the troubled one. Sarah bore this unjust burden silently for years, her childhood trauma physically manifesting in the scar on her wrist that she would anxiously rub in moments of stress. But the narrative serves as a brutal warning to families who practice this form of emotional manipulation. When you sacrifice a child's hard-earned future to fund a superficial illusion, you do not simply lose money. You burn the entire family dynamic to the ground and permanently lose that child's presence in your life. The spiritual implications of this betrayal are equally profound. The law of karma, the universal mechanism of cause and effect, is vividly depicted in the family's ultimate downfall. The very tool Kevin used to project his fake wealth, the luxury car, became the exact instrument of his public humiliation and legal ruin. Furthermore, the parents' ultimate betrayal of their daughter seeded a dark reaction, inevitably leading to their own betrayal of each other inside a federal interrogation room. Their highly sought-after prestige was revealed to be nothing more than a hollow suit of armor concealing deep debt and deceit. Sarah's eventual triumph is not a story of petty vengeance, but a blueprint for deep self-cultivation highlighting the essential virtues of wisdom, morality, and fortitude.
Wisdom is the piercing ability to see through deception, a clarity Sarah achieved when she realized her fiancé Ethan was merely an opportunist rather than a true partner. By recognizing that his love was conditional and calculated, she found the emotional strength to walk away from what she knew was a beautiful, expensive lie. Morality in its truest form often requires choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. When Sarah decided to sign the felony affidavit against her own parents, it was not an act of malice or revenge, but a desperate, necessary stand for absolute integrity. She bravely refused to participate any longer in her family's toxic web of lies, choosing to stand by the truth even when it guaranteed the loss of her family and her fiancé. Finally, her fortitude is a testament to the resilience built through trial. Facing the terrifying potential loss of her home, her career, and her relationships all within a single 48-hour period, Sarah did not succumb to despair. Instead, she channeled her overwhelming grief into a cold, absolute resolve. She continued to work no longer out of a desperate need to please others, but to construct a solid foundation that she alone owned and controlled. True healing, as Sarah ultimately discovered, begins with a conscious detachment from toxic ties. By actively choosing to stop rubbing her scar and going radio silent, she successfully cleared the spiritual clutter from her mind, inviting a peaceful, breathable quiet into her daily existence. Her story culminates in a setting that perfectly mirrors her internal transformation, a modest, charming home surrounded by an uncurated garden. This beautiful imagery serves as a powerful, enduring message for us all. A genuinely good life is never built upon artificially high credit scores, deceptive luxury cars, or the hollow approval of country club peers. It is built on safety, authentic connection, and the unwavering comfort of a clear conscience. When Sarah was offered a friends and family discount on a new luxury car by the dealership owner, she gracefully declined, proving unequivocally that she no longer needed external symbols to validate her inherent worth. She had achieved the ultimate victory, the profound ability to simply sit in silence and feel absolute safety. If Sarah's journey of betrayal, resilience, and ultimate liberation resonated with you, and if it sparked a recognition of the dynamics hiding behind the closed doors of modern neighborhoods, please subscribe and follow the channel Sarah's Revenge. We are dedicated to sharing stories that explore the complex, often hidden truths of family survival and the pursuit of authentic justice. As you listen to the quiet in your own home tonight, take a moment to look around at the life you are building and the values you are instilling in your children. Are the foundations of your family poured with the solid concrete of honesty, accountability, and unconditional fairness? Or are you perhaps, unknowingly, meticulously arranging a fragile house of cards, simply hoping the wind never blows? The legacies we leave our children are rarely the inheritances we put in the bank. They are the truths we force them to live by and the lies we force them to carry.